Imagine sitting at your sister's wedding, the room filled with 180 guests, all dressed in their finest, celebrating what should be one of the happiest days of your family. And then it happens. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Your mother, the woman who raised you, the one who has always been your rock, is stopped in front of the family table. Your future mother-in-law, pointing across the room with a self-satisfied glare, says in front of everyone, "The staff table is over there." That's where she sits. And your fiancé? He says nothing. He just watches. I froze. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The whispers of the guests seemed to multiply in my head. I could see them looking, judging, waiting. My mom, Linda Parker, 52, froze for a second, pride and disbelief colliding in her eyes. My sister, Sarah, 25, looked away, unsure what to do. And there I was, Emily Parker, 27, heart pounding, staring at a scene that felt impossible. Could this really be happening in the middle of what was supposed to be a joyful celebration? The humiliation was deliberate. Cynthia Thompson, 55, my future mother-in-law, was no stranger to control or public displays of dominance. David, 57, her husband, stood quietly beside her, watching, enabling. This wasn't an accident, a misunderstanding, or a fleeting bad mood. This was strategy. And it was cruel. I watched my mom walk across the room to the staff table. Every step was heavy, every gaze felt like a spotlight. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. 180 guests, some shocked, some whispering, all watching. And me? I just sat there. Quiet. My mind racing, my blood boiling, every instinct screaming to act, but I also knew that timing mattered. Then I realized something crucial. I had a choice. I could scream. I could confront them immediately. I could run to my mom and drag her back. Or I could do something no one expected, something deliberate, calculated, and powerful. And that choice would change everything. Because what I did next wasn't just about saving face. It was about sending a message, a lesson in respect, dignity, and courage that no one would forget. And that moment, standing there quietly before the storm, was only the beginning. The moment my mom, Linda Parker, 52, started walking toward the staff table, everything in the room shifted. It was like the air thickened, heavier with every step she took. 180 guests were watching, some shocked, some whispering, others pretending not to notice. The sound of her heels clicking on the polished floor seemed louder than ever, echoing like a drumbeat of humiliation. Cynthia Thompson, 55, my future mother-in-law, smirked, her satisfaction practically radiating across the room. David Thompson, 57, stood behind her, silent, approving her display, a calm enabler to her cruelty. I couldn't move at first. My body felt frozen. Anger mixed with disbelief. Every nerve in me screamed to stand up, to say something, anything. But I knew that rash action could backfire. I needed to observe. I needed strategy. My mom's dignity was being tested in front of everyone, and how I responded would define the rest of this day. Sarah, my sister, 25, the bride, looked away, pretending not to see. Ryan, my fiancé, 29, sat silently, unsure how to intervene, paralyzed by indecision. The room was filled with unspoken judgment and tension, whispers bouncing off the walls, glances darting between guests and family members. Some of them were silently questioning Cynthia's authority, others just reveling in the drama. Every second stretched into what felt like an eternity. I asked myself, what would you do if someone you love was humiliated like this, right in front of hundreds of people? Could you sit quietly, or would you act? I watched as my mom reached the staff table and lowered herself into a chair. Her face was calm, proud, yet her eyes betrayed the sting of humiliation. And me? I just sat there, heart racing, calculating my next move. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to cry. But I would make them regret underestimating me. Then, almost instinctively, I stood up. The room went silent. Eyes widened. Whispers stopped. And in that frozen moment, I knew that what I did next would completely change the dynamics in the room, and no one was prepared for it. I stood up slowly, deliberately. Every eye in the room turned to me. The whispers had stopped, replaced by a tense silence. My mom, sitting at the staff table, looked up at me with a mixture of surprise and relief. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. This wasn't about yelling or creating a scene, it was about showing strength, dignity, and making it absolutely clear that no one, not even my future mother-in-law, could humiliate my family in front of 180 people without consequences. Cynthia Thompson, 55, froze, her smirk fading. She wasn't used to people challenging her in public, especially not quietly, deliberately. David, 57, still silent, shifted uneasily, sensing that control was slipping through his fingers. My sister, Sarah, 25, finally looked up, wide-eyed, unsure if she should intervene, or if I already had everything under control. Ryan, my fiancé, 29, finally blinked, realizing that his inaction yesterday had allowed this situation to unfold, and now he had to witness me taking matters into my own hands. I walked toward my mom with calm authority, each step measured. I didn't need to shout, I didn't need to escalate. The quiet defiance spoke louder than any words could. I reached her side and subtly gestured to the family table. My mom's eyes lit up with understanding. She didn't move immediately. But she knew this was her moment too. The guests were leaning in, noticing the power shift. The tables had turned without a single raised voice. Cynthia and David exchanged a glance, the kind that says, "We miscalculated." And for the first time that evening, they looked uncertain. I could feel the tension ripple through the room. It wasn't just a moment of standing up for my mom, it was a calculated reversal of power. And everyone could feel it. The room had changed, subtly but irreversibly. But even as the silence hung and the in-laws processed their loss of control, I knew this wasn't over. The consequences of what I had set in motion would unfold the next day in ways that none of them, not Cynthia, not David, not even Ryan, could have anticipated. The next morning, the fallout began quietly, but it was undeniable. Cynthia and David woke to a world subtly but completely shifted. Vendors who had once deferred to their every request now questioned them, politely but firmly. Family members, who had stayed silent the night before, now exchanged knowing glances, murmuring about the previous evening. Every decision they had made to assert dominance at the wedding now seemed foolish, transparent, and ineffective. I watched from the sidelines, Emily Parker, calm but observant. The previous night had been about standing up for my mom, Linda, 52. But today I realized the impact of that single act was far greater. It wasn't just about humiliation anymore. It was about dismantling the illusion of control Cynthia and David had maintained for decades. Ryan, my fiancé, 29, finally admitted it to himself. His passivity had allowed the situation to escalate, but witnessing my calm, deliberate response had shown him another way, strength paired with strategy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was effective. The respect of the family, of the guests, and even of the vendors shifted subtly, but permanently, toward my side. Cynthia's smug composure from the night before was gone. Her carefully curated image of control had crumbled. David, silent as always, could no longer rely on the authority of his wife to maintain dominance. And my mom, sitting quietly but proud, had regained her dignity. She didn't need applause. She didn't need anyone to cheer. The act of justice had already been done. The ripple effect would continue all day. Conversations that had been carefully scripted by the in-laws now faltered. Their influence over events, over family perception, over social standing, was gone. And it had all started with a simple, deliberate choice, to stand up for what was right, in front of 180 witnesses, without shouting, without drama, but with unwavering resolve. But even as the wedding continued, a question hung in the air. How would Cynthia and David respond now that their control had been shattered? The consequences of their arrogance weren't over. They had underestimated me. And the storm they had triggered for themselves was far from finished. By the end of the day, the room had changed. What had started as a celebration of my sister's wedding had transformed into a quiet but undeniable lesson in respect, boundaries, and courage. My mom, Linda Parker, 52, looked at me with pride in her eyes, a smile that didn't need words. "You handled that perfectly," she whispered, and I realized she understood that this wasn't just about a single moment of humiliation. It was about reclaiming dignity in front of everyone who had witnessed it. Cynthia and David, 55 and 57, were forced to reflect on their actions. Their carefully maintained image of control, the social power they relied on, had crumbled in just a few hours. And it had happened without me raising my voice, without me creating drama. The quiet, deliberate way I had acted had shown everyone something important. Power only works when people allow it to. When no one submits to intimidation, even the most confident authority figures lose their influence. Sarah, my sister, 25, came over later, finally understanding what had happened. She had looked away during the initial humiliation, unsure of what to do. But seeing how I handled it, calm, deliberate, strategic, taught her a lesson she would never forget. Ryan, my fiancé, 29, acknowledged quietly that his inaction the night before had been a mistake, and that watching me step up had changed his understanding of strength, courage, and family loyalty. The wedding went on, and though everyone enjoyed the celebrations, the memory of that moment lingered. Not as shame for my mom, but as a reminder to everyone present, dignity and courage can rewrite the rules in an instant. And here's the lesson I want viewers to take away. Sometimes the quietest, most deliberate choices have the most powerful impact. Courage isn't always loud or dramatic. It can be calm, strategic, and unwavering. That day, I didn't just protect my mom, I reclaimed respect for my family, my future, and myself. So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet? Or would you take a step no one expected and change everything? Sometimes, the smallest act of courage can create the biggest ripple. And for me, standing up that day wasn't just a choice. It was a declaration that no one could ever humiliate my family in my presence again.